friends have never been more important than they are today. Everywhere you turn, there seems to be reasons to give up or not even try at all. We want to be the light in these times and an inspiration for others to keep pushing forward. My journey of growth comes through humility, and I welcome all who are looking to grow with me. Thanks for tuning in to the Crew First Culture Podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome back once again to Crew First Culture Podcast. My name is Jeremy, and thank you, as always, for spending some time with us today. Really looking forward to another conversation today. And actually, this is a day I've been waiting for quite a while. I honestly didn't know when or if it would happen, but very excited to have our guest on today, Scott Thompson. How are you doing today, Scott?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. Thank you for having me on.
I very appreciate you spending some time with us today. And I feel weird calling you Scott. So Chief Scott Thompson, I feel more comfortable to say, but
Scott is fine. I'm perfectly comfortable with that. Whatever works for you.
All right. So I've listened to several things that you've been on. You know, you've been on the Weekly Scrap with Corley Moore. You've been on Fit to Fight Fire podcast, and another video that I just happened to find is a interview that you had with Sons of the Flag, and I found that on YouTube. And I'm saying that just to like a couple of the guests that I've had on in the past. I don't want to have you go into the same stuff that you keep saying. So if it's all right with you, I will kind of steer people in those directions, because you give a really good bio and a couple of those about your past history and kind of where you started and through your journey, because it's been quite a journey, different organizations and all that. But so if you're okay with it, I'll steer them in that direction for more kind of background type issue or story on you. So we'll have a little bit more time to get into whatever else. So go ahead and just kind of give whatever bio or that you want to give, just to let everybody know that hasn't heard of you, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, really, right now I'm with the Colony, Texas. I'm the fire chief there. I've been there 11 years. I'm about 36 years into my career. I started in Plano, Texas in the mid-'80s and worked a few departments since then. But that's the important thing. The Colony is located just north of Dallas. We're surrounded by Frisco and Plano, Carrollton, and Louisville, and we're a rapidly growing city. Currently, we're 4 stations, and we're building station number 5 right now, and that'll be it for us. So we're a small suburban department located in a region that's really growing, and it's presented us with some great opportunities and challenges, and we're having a lot of fun right now. We're able to do some pretty cool things. We've got great support from our council and city leadership. So those are probably really the important things. Like you say, my past is my past, but that's where we are now. I got 2 sons on the job. One's in Dallas and one's in Arlington. So I'm proud of them that they chose the family business, and that's really about it.
That's awesome. So it's interesting, kind of just preparing myself for this conversation. I just kind of thinking, I've never personally met Chief Thompson. I've never even been in the same room as Chief Thompson, but he has made a huge impact on basically the direction my career has gone this past year. And I didn't say anything to him about this before we started, but I just kind of want to use that as an example of to everybody out there that, man, you can reach people that you don't even know you're reaching, as long as you're putting your message out there, as long as you're doing what you feel is right and sharing what you have. And so I wanted to take a second to thank you, Chief, for your message that you're putting out there, for the book that you put out. And it's inspiring to me, because there are a lot of people out there, a lot of firefighters and officers in every rank, that want so badly to work for somebody like you. And, not that you're I know the first thing, and and all this and that. But just to have somebody that lives by the just everything that you speak for and live for, and I want to say for their on their account and for mine, I really appreciate everything that you're doing for the fire service. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I greatly appreciate it. Sometimes you feel like nobody's listening, so thank you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that and that's a big deal. You know, I feel I think there's a lot of people like that. You know, you hear the negative feedback. It seems a lot more than the positive feedback. And you know, I talked to somebody the other day, another person that I really look up to, and he told me the exact same thing. It's like, well, thanks for the feedback. I don't hear a lot of positive feedback, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, but I wanted to make sure that I said that, because just in case, you know, if you don't hear a lot, there are a lot of people out there that are really looking up to what you're doing and what you have done. So
Well, I appreciate
that,
that. Thank
I
you very
appreciate it.
much.
You're welcome. So kind of getting into it here. Obviously, if you haven't known yet, Chief Thompson put out a book a little while back, The Functional Fire Company. And I am not lucky enough to own the book, but I did get in touch with somebody that had one a few days ago and kind of started to work my way through it. And man, I'm very impressed. I mean, it's pretty much exactly what I expected it to be. But I think where I want to start is there is a very obvious theme with you throughout the book, throughout these other podcasts that I've heard you speak on, and you kind of word it different in different areas. So I'm just going to kind of paraphrase it in generic terms. But basically, you can either choose to accept the quotation mark accidental culture that exists and do nothing about it, or you can actually work to create your ideal culture and what you want as the culture. And I couldn't agree more in any way, and I couldn't think of a better way to kind of start this conversation than with that. And so kind of where did you start realizing that, and kind of what does that mean to you?
Well, I think it really started when I was young and wanting to get into the fire service. You know, I think we all have this idea of what the fire service should look like. I grew up 28 miles north of New York City in a place called Croton-on-Hudson, so I had a heavy FDNY influence, and it was, you know, in the 70s during their war years. I remember watching on the news. It was either, you know, something about Vietnam earlier in the 70s, late 60s, or fires in New York City. So you start to kind of start forming, I guess, this idea, if you will, of what you think something should be. And so it probably started like that as I got into my career. I had this vision in my head of what I thought a fire department should be in. And so that's kind of the basics of it. Now, I wasn't really looking at culture then, but I was really trying to identify what it was about organizations that made them special. You know, back when I was growing up, we didn't have this technology. So one of the things that I did is I would spend my vacation time each year, and I would travel to a firehouse someplace in the country that was busy and doing stuff. And I would spend a week there. I've traveled to, you know, obviously places around Texas, Dallas, and Houston, but been up to FDNY a couple times, Chicago, Denver, California. And I would go into these organizations. I just wanted to kind of get the feel for the organization, but really study these fire companies that were doing pretty cool things. And so as I started out very broad, I kind of wanted to define what it was that made these organizations unique in their own way. And so I started really studying culture, but it was a battle. I can remember I started teaching in FDIC in 2002. And I remember probably 2005, 2006 submitting classes on culture, and they would get turned down. And the fire service, I don't think really understood what culture was or the influence that culture can have on an organization. personally, and after studying it for many, many years, and 9 years very seriously in preparing for the book, I think culture is one of the most important things of any organization. I mean, every organization has one, whether it's accidental or it's by design. And you got to think about it. The culture of an organization, the subcultures, the microcultures, influence everybody in that organization. Everybody in that organization along the same lines can influence the culture. So when you really break it down, everything we really do during a tour of duty to some way or the other has a cultural influence. So it's that important. So I thought, wow, well, this is a pretty big deal. So I wanted to learn about it and then figure out how to, number one, identify it, and then look at ways to change it, and then manage that change process and try to work towards this vision that I had of a suburban fire department through the culture of the organization.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear you talk about that. And I know, obviously you've been in the fire service, longer than I have, so our timelines are off. But I can't think back to a time probably earlier than maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I really even knew what the term culture in an organization even was. And that's weird to me because now it's like I can't get enough of that topic. I want to absorb as much as I can. And maybe it was just one of the many flips that were switched when I kind of gained a little bit of formal leadership, when I promoted to an officer role, and that kind of mindset changed. But it's interesting to me to hear you say that 15 years ago you were kind of pushing the thought of culture in the fire service, and nobody was really biting on it yet. But nowadays it's like it's starting to really seem like it's picking up some steam, and that's great because I'm like you. I think it is so important, and I see it daily, and that's just in my small organization, what the culture does for crew, a shift, the department. And it's just, and it's just everywhere, like you said. And if you want to ignore it, it doesn't mean it's going away. It's still there. It just means it's being neglected, like you say. And so that kind of leads into another question, and something you bring up in your book and other places, is you like to I'm trying to figure out the way you turn it. Cultural management, basically every day by the leadership team is how you describe it, and kind of give us a little idea of what that looks like, what you kind of mean by that.
Well, we did something, and I don't know if you got to it in the book yet, that I call the Colony Project, just because there was not a better name for it, where we really looked at the organization, and we looked at the things that influenced our organization internally and externally. And this provided great insight for all of our formal leaders, our company officers, our shift commanders, division chiefs, ops chiefs. And what it did, it started to give us an understanding. Now, without sounding arrogant, I mean, we got problems like everybody else, but you got to think the Colony, it was this little city that on paper is really nothing. Where there's nothing spectacular really, and this is going back before we've had some growth about the city or the department yet. Nobody was leaving. We didn't have any turnover in 11 years, even more than, 11 years I've been here. Nobody's left to go to a fire department, another fire department job. Now I got to put an asterisk by that, because we recently had somebody who came from a department here, had a baby, they had family, so they went back. So that we had that. We were getting a tremendous amount of support from our city leaders and from our citizens, and things were going really, really good. And there wasn't any real reason. I mean, we aren't the highest paid department. We didn't have the nicest equipment, and we really didn't understand why things were going the way they were. Now, in the area that I'm in, this North Texas area, it's highly competitive right now for firefighter, paramedic positions, but also cities for economic development projects. So we really wanted to understand what the type of firefighter, paramedics that we were looking for wanted in a job. What, you know, that vision I said I had in my head, we wanted to understand that because there was a certain type of person that we wanted to attract and we wanted to stay with our organization. So through that, we really were able to identify the organizational culture, the subculture, and the microcultures that existed in the organization. But we also had some tools and a process to modify those cultures to move them in a direction. We call it a chosen learning culture. And so when I say managing the culture every day is I now have insight to where I understand what the normative behavior of the organization kind of is, the morale, the climate. You know, the climate is kind of a snapshot of the culture at any given time. So I kind of know it. Like say, I've referred to it before. And back in the day, we had what we call a Holley 4-barrel carburetor, and before they had fuel injection, and I had a hot rod, so I was constantly messing with it. It was either too rich or too lean. You know, you want to get the maximum horsepower out of this big block engine, and the culture's kind of like that. So I manage it every day, and I look for signs and symptoms that tell me that things are going well, or I recognize signs and symptoms that say, hey, something's out of whack, and then I've got to work on those. Because if I don't, and these mostly are seen in morale and climate issues, if I don't address those, then it's going to impact the culture. And then, you know, overnight it can be, and I've seen it happen. I've seen organizations that for a period of time, everybody wanted to work there. And then all of a sudden, nobody wants to work there. And the only thing that changed was the chief of the department. So that person, based on their leadership and operational philosophies, changed the culture of that organization over a period of time. So I'm very, very aware of that. In my opinion, there's really nothing more important than the culture. You know, people will probably argue. So I'll say it's in the top 3. So if I'm the leader of the organization and everybody is looking to me to create an environment that they can be successful and survive in, I think a big part of my job is to do that and manage it daily. You know, a lot of fire chiefs think to be successful, you're constantly building and buying and hiring, and that's the sign of success. You know, oh, I've got all this stuff. We do all these things. Yeah. We got well, if you don't have a culture that allows firefighters to do the job we hired them to do, and to do that well, and if you don't support a level of excellence through standards, all that stuff doesn't matter. Just stuff.
Absolutely. So something else I heard you talk about, and this may be just a fictional, just an example, but you talk about going into a firehouse and kind of feeling like something was off. And so you pull, you know, the senior firefighter, whoever aside, and kind of say, man, something seems wrong, and what it is, what's going on. And they say, well, Chief, that memo you sent out, it just kind of rubbed us wrong, or, you know, whatever it was. So my next question is, you didn't spend your entire career at this department. You know, you came in as an outside person, so you had no relationships with anybody. How do you go from a fire chief that doesn't have everyday communication with everybody and is new to an organization to somebody that can walk in a firehouse and just feel like something is off because you know them that well? How do you do that?
Well, it took a lot of time to develop. Now my first 5 or 6 years there, that wasn't the case at all. I was learning the organization. But now we just promoted the first generations of officers that have really been a part of this thing since kind of the beginning. So they really know nothing else than this chosen culture, and they know the specifics of it, and what we want to accomplish each day, and what we want our culture to value, to be a learning culture, daily quality training and those things. So you start to hear through conversations, really is the big thing, or through promotional processes or even hiring processes, you start to hear communication that is descriptive of the culture. And so you hear things being repeated, just like you kind of hit on some things. So you hear that culture being described, that chosen culture. And so you know that the guys and gals of the organization kind of get it. So two-way trust is very big with me. I think, and I won't get into that, that's another story, but I spent a lot of time visiting with fire chiefs and visiting with firefighters. And there was always kind of this separation of kind of trust. It was kind of us against them. So when I see signs and symptoms that maybe that trust is being compromised, or that this firehouse is not as engaged, or maybe they're just not as upbeat, or they're quiet, or some of the questions that they're asking, they're kind of fishing around here. Maybe they don't know the exact question to ask, but something's up. And so all those little things over time you kind of pick up, and every firehouse has a personality, just like every person does. And so you go and you have coffee in those fire stations, and a lot of times it's without an agenda, and you know the players there, and when they're when they're tuned up and they're doing well, and when something's just not right. And that just comes over time. But it took me many years after coming into this organization to get that sense of what that's supposed to be. And now we're growing. I mean, we've doubled in size, and we've hired a lot of people. So that's becoming a little bit more difficult now. So it's, I'm kind of having to pay a little closer attention, and I can do a much better job. We've been so busy, I'm not getting into firehouses near as much as I'd like to, and that shouldn't be any excuse. But it's getting more and more difficult. I think we're up to the 80 plus members in operations, so it's getting a little more difficult. I'm sad to say.
Yeah. No, I really like the idea of like you said, they're coming in, drinking some coffee, no agenda, just talking. If you want to say that you want to get the true feel of where the organization is, and see how the morale and all that is, then just go in with nothing on the table, just to talk, just to meet with people, just to hang out and be a part of their world. And I think that goes a long way. And that's kind of, I had a feeling I knew the direction you were going to go with that last question of kind of how you've achieved that. And that's exactly kind of what I was looking for, is just you putting in the effort and you putting in the time to get to know people and to really build that relationship. And I get, fire chiefs I have no idea what all fire chiefs do. I know that it's a lot of stuff I don't want to do. So I respect and appreciate that. But I feel like if you're in that role, those are your people, and you have got to figure out a way to really get to know and build some relationship with them, for sure.
I think you get to a point, and we're there now, and it took a long time though. And now the men and women of the organization want to protect what we have. So they're much more likely to come to me or the ops chief or their battalion chief, excuse me, and to address issues, and they want to protect. So it kind of becomes self-policing. If we get somebody who, kind of a knucklehead and starts to act up a little bit and is threatening what they want to have in their firehouse, well, they take care of that now. And it's very rare that I have to get involved or the ops chief has to get involved. They just take care of it because they know what the other side can look like. And so when you get to that point, then a lot of really, really cool things happen.
Yeah. No, I think that right there is a true sign of what the culture is. The culture is not what we're doing when the captain is at the station, but when he takes off, we do something else, like you just said. It's what we do, it's who we are, it's who we want, it's what we want. And that, man, that right there tells you exactly where you're at. If you're asking where the culture is, if you have people fighting for that way of life, as you know, the crew or the department, that that's a good measure of how you're doing. I guarantee you.
And a big part of it is understanding
Something,
what culture is. I don't think a lot of the fire service really understands
yeah,
what culture is. And I've had recently
yeah,
fire chiefs tell me at a conference here in Texas, I did a little presentation, and one of them comes goes, "That culture stuff's a lot of hocus pocus." And I'm kind of looking at him and go, I bet you have a lot of turnover. Oh yeah, but it's other stuff. It's it's money and it's this and that. And so a lot of people, I think that's really the place to start. Like you say, it's assumptions, it's how we get things done, it's our rituals, it's our routines, it's a lot of things. So a big part of this whole culture formula is understanding what culture is, and then the levels of culture that exist in your organization.
yeah. Something I find really interesting, a little kind of area in your book. You go into, so climate of an organization is the attitude, the morale is the mood, and the culture is the personality. And man, I really like that analogy, because you're basically saying that the organization, the department, the crew, whatever particular group you're discussing this with, it's a living thing. And you have that climate, that's the attitude. You have that morale, that's the mood, whether it's good or bad. And you have that culture, which is literally the personality of that department, of that crew. And I really love that analogy, because like you just said, there's a lot of people that don't understand what that even means. And so when you put it in that terms, it's really easy to see that you can greatly affect an organization by changing the attitude a little bit, changing the mood a little bit, changing the personnel a little bit, and those move into those other categories of what they really are. And I really like that. Is that kind of your thinking as well on that?
It is, but what I think is maybe more important is when you break it down like that, then every member of the organization can kind of see that they can have an influence. Everybody in our organization is valuable, from the newest person to the most senior. So when you break it down, this new person, this junior member, can understand that they have a direct influence on that level of the culture, whether it's the microculture or the subculture. So then they can kind of start focusing on maybe some things that they're doing, or how they're communicating, or how they're interacting, and start to see some return on that. And I think that's where it pays tremendous dividends, is that's how people start to take ownership of the culture, and feel like they can have input as to what that looks like.
Yeah. So playing right off of what you're talking about, it's, like I told you before we started recording, I've kind of jotted down some notes. I have no idea how far we'll get into it, however much time you got, but that's exactly kind of the direction of one of my notes, is that ownership. And so I've heard you talk about, you allow the stations to have their own kind of designs of hats and jackets, and just that ownership and personalization of that stuff, to build crew and station and firehouse pride and all that. And you guys go to the leather helmets, and just some different things like that. Man, I think I think that's so big, and I think it's such a thing. Yeah, okay, some of this stuff might cost some money, but in the big picture, we're talking about a little bit of money to make a huge difference in morale and pride and ownership and all that. And I I love that. I wish that there was more of that. And so kind of going off that, is that something that you kind of brought in, or was that already there?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say I brought it in. And I want to say we don't make our our guys and gals wear leather helmets. We give them that option, and I just want to
Yeah.
make that clear. We make that. It was something I think that I presented early on and said, hey, would you all be interested in looking at a leather helmet? And there was an excitement about that. So it's going to my boss and saying, hey, for a couple $100 more, I think we can do something for the troops that'll be positive. We're going to have a lot of negatives, so let's take advantage of a positive. And so I don't remember exactly how it came in. And then when you start doing that, then you'll have a company come to you with a company logo, and you got a decision at that point. If a crew has taken the time to sit down and design what represents them, and then they've spent their own money, they found a vendor to draw it all up and the colors, and they've talked to the other shifts, and they got to a point that says, hey, this is us. And then they come to the fire chief or the ops chief, and there can be one or two reactions. The fire chief can look at that as initiative and ownership, and that if they're doing this is representing them, and from now on, that's going to be a sign of their effort and their work ethic, and that's their brand. So you can play off of that and say, hey, this is cool that you want to do this, or you can shut it down and look for all the reasons why it's too aggressive, or you're going to assume that these people are going to be upset about it, and they're going to go back and they're going to throw it in the trash, and they're never going to talk about it again, and that's gone. I can tell you this: I've been in a leadership position, I don't know, 20 or 21 years, and I've never had anybody complain because we wore leather helmets. I never had anybody complain about tattoos. I've never had anybody complain about us wearing different T-shirts. I've never had anybody complain about a ball cap being worn backwards. Now, we want to look professional. We are a tribe. We want to be uniform. But I mean, I just think that if you got a company that takes that initiative and they want to put themselves out there as being this, then that's great. That to me, that's just cool, and it shows initiative. And yeah, there's 1,000 reasons why we shouldn't do it, but there's one good reason to do it, and that's that you're allowing that firehouse to take a little bit of ownership of their identity.
Yeah. I've
Did I answer your
only
question?
been a part of one organization. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it's just funny. I just sit here and just kind of it just kind of goes with some things going on, in our department as well. And so,
You're not alone. Trust me.
but
You're not alone.
I know. But just thinking for my personal example, I've been here for 18 years. So I have a lot invested in this department, and I care about this department a lot. And so I'm obviously okay with representing the department with the names on the trucks and the jackets and the shirts and all that. But I I have so much more pride in my particular crew because it's mine. It's who we are, and I want so bad to have some of that. I don't know if you want to call it, trying to think of a good way to describe it, but not really separation from the other crews or whatever. But
It's identity. Call it
I
identity.
just have a lot of,
Celebration.
yeah, no, that's a good way. Yeah, I want us to be able to represent who we are. It's exactly right. And it's frustrating to not have that ability because, it's kind of looked at as you're trying to be an individual, or, it's going to look like all unprofessional because you're going to have all this. And obviously I'm not trying to get into things that are going to get me in trouble by talking about them, but it's hard for this conversation to happen without getting into that. And it's just, I love seeing administration give that leeway to people that are putting that effort into wanting to take pride in who they are. And if you have a crew that isn't into that and doesn't put the work into it, and just goes with the status quo, okay, whatever. But if they're putting that effort into it, if they take that much pride in who they are, why not give them that to really even fire, light it the fire even more and push them even harder. So
But there's two sides to it,
yeah,
though.
that's
There's another side. If all they're worried about is designing T-shirts and stickers, and there are a bunch of mopes on the fire ground, they haven't earned that. I mean, if you look at the Marine
yeah,
Corps uniform, every part of the uniform represents something. So, if I go into an organization day one, it's not going to be, hey, pick out your company logos and all this, and that's our focus. It's over time. I've asked this organization to do a ton of things. I mean, we train every day. We have very high standards. I really, really, really hold this organization accountable. So when they're successful, and that's some way that I can allow them to recognize their efforts, man, to me that's a no-brainer. If these
yeah,
guys, if you're slow getting out of the house, if they can't throw a ladder, if they don't, their shirt's going to say we suck less. But if they're good and they're solid and they want it, they want a little bit of pride and show what that effort represents. The military has it. I mean, I just think it's an easy way to recognize a small group's effort.
yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think for the most part, if you have a crew that, or a firehouse or whatever, that is wanting to do that, I think that's the kind of crew you're dealing with. It's the crew that is doing extra, that's doing more, that's going far beyond, the minimum standard type
More times
crews.
than
And
not,
so
it definitely is. More times
yeah.
than not, it is. I can tell you that for a fact.
So another, and this is kind of more of my information, but so you recently put out a post, you're hiring,
Yes,
got
sir.
a bunch of spots open for paramedic firefighters. I'll put that plug out for you if somebody's
Thank you.
listening that hadn't seen the post.
Thank
I
you.
wish my circumstances were different. I would be applying myself. But
I'd
uh,
love that.
in the post, the first line says that you're going to be going to a 4896 schedule. And so this is something that, again, we have been interested in going to, in our organization. And I just kind of want to test the waters on what you had to say about that. Is that, where did that come from? Is that a kind of from the ground troops idea, or is this something of
No,
yours?
no,
Or
no. And I was originally against it, and truth be told, I'm still not 100% for it. But I don't know if you know the other story. So I mentioned that it's very competitive here to get firefighter paramedics. So
yeah,
we did something that nobody else in Texas has done, is we created a paramedic only position. So we will hire paramedics just for our ambulances. We won't make them go to fire school. They're on our ambulances. They're part of our fire company. So that was our first big change to address this shortage of people. And our organization has made that work. We're 3 or 4 years into it now, and it's working great. So I asked this organization to do something which everybody told me I was crazy to do, and they did it. So when the talk started coming up about 4896, we talked about it a couple of years ago, and I was against it, but I wanted to know what number wanted it, and the majority didn't want it. So I've got a new, we're a right to work state, so we have associations. We don't have unions. So I went to my association president, and I said, get a vote for me, and let's just find out where we are, because we're not going to put a lot of work into it if nobody wants it.
yeah,
And about 72 members wanted it, so we really started to dig deep in it. Like I say, a matter of fact, up until the morning that I made the decision to do it, I was against it, and I could have went
yeah,
either way that day. I put a tremendous amount of thought into this and a lot of homework, but I believe that the organization is mature enough and committed enough to manage it. I felt like this is another thing that we can do to be competitive for firefighter paramedics against other departments that pay more than we do and have cooler stuff than we do. But I guess the thing that really caused me to pull the trigger is I believe wholeheartedly every organization certainly in this area, in the North Texas area, will have to look at this in the next 3 to 5 years if they hope to attract good people. So it was either do it now or do it later. We're getting ready to hire for a fire station. So let's pull the trigger now. You know, everybody who does it that I've talked to likes it. I have some concerns as a fire chief, I'll be honest. There's some safety concerns, or, you know, there's things regarding sleep study and mental health. But we decided to do it, and it was, you know, everybody says, well, there's no benefit to the city. It's only a benefit to your members. Well, we can say that every time we give them a pay raise. When our guys and gals get a pay raise, there's no benefit to the city. It's a benefit to them. And I don't know what's wrong with giving our members something. I mean, we ask a lot out of them.
Yeah.
What it's okay. So yeah, this is 100%. But if they're more engaged and they have less stress in their life because they're not driving as much and they're sleeping better, we're going to see that when we go out and serve our citizens, I believe. And I could be wrong. I mean, we're going to look at this, but that's kind of how we got there. A lot of research, a lot of asking questions, and, you know, a little bit of faith, just saying, hey, I believe our organization can make this work. And that's how we kind of got there. We're not going till January, but everybody, my bosses support it, so it's going to happen.
Good deal. So I guess the next kind of question I have for you, and I brought this up to you last night just to kind of let you have a little head or idea of that I was going to ask for, but somewhere I heard you talk about the importance of learning about how people learn and human nature. And this was interesting to me because I feel like it's a huge lapse in the way officers are trained, or the areas that officers are trained. You get lots of tactics, and you get lots of, you know, radio and all this stuff, but dealing with humans, which is what we do 24 hours that we're working, is just not dealt with. It's a on the job training type thing. And so what are some resources that you can give us, or things that we can go to learn about human nature and kind of the science behind how people learn?
Well, to make it more specific, I've been doing a lot of research on the science of performance, because what we do is we perform. And I say this, and I've said it often, if we want to be viewed as professionals and compensated as professionals and held at that level, we have got to prepare ourselves mentally, physically, mechanically, and procedurally to compete with fire, rescue, and emergency medical problems on a professional level. Now, that means an elite level, better than anybody else. And so I've been spending a lot of time on influence and the science of performance. And if you look at the military, if you look at sports teams, the fire service seems to be the only ones that don't get it. You know, everybody should be able to do everything really, really well. And we know that doesn't work. And if I would have said to you, if we would have been doing this last year and talked about a movement to defund the police, you would have thought I was crazy. Yet that's our reality. So the fire department is the next biggest piece of the pie. And I don't think it's beyond anybody's realm of possibilities to say, hey, you know, we're going to talk about defunding the fire department next. So by understanding human nature, what motivates people, what demotivates people, what people want short-term, what they want long-term, what their values are and their goals, we can kind of work with that to build teams, fire companies that are I believe are going to be high performers. They're going to compete with those problems at a professional level, which is an elite level, right? That's what some people think professionalism is just about pay. It's to me, it's about performance. And I'm going to offer a quote here that I mention frequently, and it came from Pete Lunn, and Pete was at the time was a lieutenant in Rescue 3 in the South Bronx, and I got to spend some time with him, and we later became friends. And this was in October of 92, and it was a Wednesday, and we were sitting there at the kitchen table at an old firehouse before they moved into their new quarters. And I was currently working in Plano, Texas. And I remember looking at Pete and going, man, what am I doing here? What is this kid from Plano doing here? And he stopped me. He said, Scott, he said, you have every opportunity to be a firefighter at the highest level in Plano, Texas, as I do in the South Bronx. It's just going to look a little different. Okay. So we all have that possibility. So by understanding human nature and the science of performance, we can start as an organization to develop together, if you will, so that we build these high performance fire companies. And I really dread the day that if we're in an organization where we don't have any standards, and we're not committed to quality learning, that our citizens find out that their survivability is philosophical versus situational. In other words, because this truck company on this side of town doesn't believe in vertical ventilation and they don't believe in aggressive search, and this truck on this side of town does, that I have a better chance of surviving in truck one's district than I do in truck eight's district. How do we explain that? So that's kind of a roundabout way of describing the motivation. So, I mean, there's a lot of good books. I mean, this is one, The Science of Accelerated Learning, The Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. This is a book that I did on the scrap. I talked about on the scrap, The Laws of Human Nature. And it's really just learning about people. So in our organization, in the Colony Fire Department, everything focuses on four things. And my expectation is for the organization to be prepared mentally, physically, mechanically, and procedurally to do four things. Number one is take care of people, them and us. So the only way we can do that is by understanding people, by being able to deliver a high level of service, but knowing what it is that people need. And so all this kind of comes together, and that becomes something that our culture values. So it's a big kind of it's a circle where it kind of all meets up, and it all supports one another, and that's a big part of the chosen culture. And I said a learning culture is that we understand human nature, we understand how people learn. Then we can really do things to support that, and not just talk about it and say, hey, it's a cool thing that hangs on the wall. We can actually commit to it.
No, that's good.
I don't have any short explanations for anything. Sorry.
No, and that's not a question that does. If you give a short answer to that question, you're not really getting into it. I'll say that much. So, no, I appreciate that, and like I said, I just feel like it's an area that new officers just you aren't prepared. You're just not. If hopefully you have some life experiences or whatever behind the scenes that has maybe prepared you some for dealing with people and solving problems and things like that. But educationally speaking, I think there's just not much of that going into that role. And man, it's almost all that's what we do. And and I've said it before that if you have a crew of 3 or if you have a crew of 12, you have to deal with 3 different or 12 different personalities, different ways that those people learn, different things or different ways that they like you can speak to somebody different ways. And it's so difficult the more you add to figure all this out. And so, I think
so. Let me offer you a tool.
Things like that and it's huge.
Let me offer you a tool to make it easy for you. If you will, picture a line, okay? And leadership is influence. Okay, we're either a positive influence or a negative influence. Sometimes if we do things or don't do things, even not doing something can be a negative influence. So if we look at that line throughout the day as you have interactions, you can ask yourself, if I'm above the line, I'm a positive influence. If I'm below the line, I'm a negative influence. Now that influence needs to move towards kind of what the book about is, this company being functional. And functional kind of means by design, it serves a purpose, right? And you've got to kind of define to your crew what that is if it doesn't come up from up above. So that same line, you can ask yourself, are we functional right now? Or are we dysfunctional? If we're dysfunctional, if we're not prepared, like I said, mentally, physically, mechanically, procedurally, we're dysfunctional. So I've got to influence this group or this member to get us back above the line. My influence has got to be positive to get this company functional so that when we go out and serve our people, we're delivering the best service. And it's kind of a check and balance of kind of saying, where are we throughout the day? You know, hopefully every officer goes into the firehouse in the morning with a vision of how they would like the day to go. And I always say roll call is the best time to practice leadership. And officers that do that are going to have an advantage. Those that don't are giving leadership away. But when you do that, then when you leave the firehouse the next morning, you can reflect on that influence. Was I a positive influence for a majority of the day, or was I a negative influence? And that sets you up for the next shift. So maybe that helps you package it a little bit instead of looking at this gigantic thing called human nature, and personalities, and personal values, and character, and all that, of just saying, hey, what does my influence need to be for my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 person group, and focus on that. And a lot of times, if you know your people, they'll let you know if you're being a positive influence or a negative influence. And that's what you got to focus on. If you're being a positive influence and your company is functioning the way it's supposed to, that's the best you can do.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's absolutely, you know, like any huge or, you know, big problem. If you look at the big problem, if you look at the overwhelming stuff that has to happen, it really isn't going to serve you any purpose. You've got to break it down into the manageable pieces and take the first steps, and, you know, the single bite of the elephant, you know, all those type of things. And just you saying that makes me automatically think, you know, I definitely see some areas in my day that I need to take more advantage of. You know,
we all can
call that you call it, or whatever. Do what?
We all can. We all can have those. Nobody is exempt from being better each day. But if you think in your firehouse, just as simple as sitting around the kitchen table, if somebody really gets into some disruptive communication, well, you know that's a negative influence. That's distracting the company. But your reaction to that is even more important. If you allow it to happen, then you're becoming part of that negative influence. Now, if you step in to correct that, the guys may not like you for it. They may, you know, they may get mad at you and say, oh, you know, this or that. But you're being the influence that you're supposed to be in that group, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's great. And like I said, I not that I'm saying I'm alone in having areas to improve, but it's good to be able to step back, hear something like that, and automatically say, okay, here's an area I can do better at. I can be doing this more, you know, things like that. And it's really helpful to break those things down into smaller, more manageable type things that you can start working on. So that's a good way to think about it for sure. You another kind of quote, I guess you call it, in the book, and this is something that it's literally a part of my message. It's a part of my, I don't know what you want to call it, but to me, it's why I'm a leader. And you say that, you know, you're asking the question, are you positioning your company officers, or if you're a company officer, if you're positioning your firefighters in a place for success or failure? And like I said, that if you ask me what a leader is, or why I do it, that's my answer. It's I'm doing this so that I can, to my best ability, put my guys and girls in the best possible place to succeed. And that's, I like seeing you say the same thing, because I feel that's so important.
I'm going to challenge you a minute, though, and maybe you've done this, but most that I ask this to not. To buy into that, though, you've got to really define what success looks like at the fire company level. So in order to really do that, it's easy to say, you know, I hear all the time, well, the fire went out and everybody went home. Okay, put that aside.
Yep.
But if my job at the fire as a fire chief is to create an environment where my folks can be successful and surviving. Well, we know what the survival part is, but that's not just all physical survival. It's also career survival, so I don't lose my job. But really, what does success at the fire company level look like? And so if you really define that and you take the time to say, hey, you know, I'm an engine company, I'm in a truck company, or I'm in a firehouse with both. This is what success looks like. Then your message, your message of success, you're continually communicating what that is. A lot of fire chiefs get in trouble because they're the head of this organization and they don't have a vision and they don't know what success looks like. And I don't know how you lead from day to day. I don't know how you are that positive influence if you don't know what you're working towards. It's kind of like a standard. If you don't have standards, what are you training towards? What are you measuring by? What are you evaluating by? It's kind of the equivalent of organizational leadership freelancing. So that's important. And one of the things that all leaders can do is take the time to define what success looks like, and from that create a vision of success. And I think that's the best time that any new officer or existing officer can really do to invest in their people. Because without that, how do you know if you're truly positioning them for success and survival?
That's a great point. You know, you can, and this kind of bleeds into personal life too, as well. It's just something that I deal with constantly is you could try so hard to do something for somebody, do nice things, or lead somebody in the best way that you think is right, or, you know, whatever. You're working hard to do good things, but if you have no direction, or if you're kind of headed in a wrong way of what you actually are wanting, you know, you're wasting your time and effort and everything. And so it's absolutely right. You got to have a target, basically, and if you don't, there's no telling where you're going to go, and that doesn't matter if you're working hard towards it or not. You're just kind of flying aimlessly, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of get into, you said earlier about the normative behavior, and that kind of plays into the same thing. You're either gearing up that normative behavior towards success and survival, or you're allowing your people to drift towards failure. What kind of describe what normative behavior? What do you mean by that?
Well, society has normative behavior, right? Right now, with everything going on in our country, I don't know what normative behavior really is anymore. But it used to be, it used to be pretty obvious. We're patriots that support our flag and our country, but our society has what they consider normative behavior. This is acceptable, and so in the firehouse, if we deviate from that's when we get in trouble. So, we've heard in the past terrible things go on in firehouses, and because of bullying, because of hazing, and that has deviated from what our society considers normative behavior. So we have to understand those are kind of like the rules, where the acceptable behaviors are normative behaviors. So when we start deviating from those, we've got to use great caution. And it's typically when there's deviation from normative behavior that people's careers become jeopardized. So that's really what that is. It's saying, hey, there's a society out there that believes this is acceptable, and we have to understand that so we don't deviate too far from that.
I got you. Yeah, definitely something to keep in mind for sure. And I guess it's really just something to kind of measure where you're at along the process and make sure that you're on the right track.
Like I said, a big part of that survival, we want our people to survive when they go out the door. And I'm not even going to say this compares to being killed or having a career-ending injury. But if you and I were allowed to drift towards failure enough to where we lost our job because our supervisor allowed us to drift towards failure, that's a life-altering experience. I know I can't go anywhere else and get the deal that I have now. I'm going to work at Home Depot or something.
Yeah.
So part of our job as supervisors is to protect our people on the fire ground, on the roadway, make sure they're not harmed physically, but also don't allow them to drift towards failure by deviating from those normative behaviors till they get to a point where now their career is in jeopardy because they've had their baby, they got their mortgage, and maybe taking care of their moms. And now we've allowed them to get to a point where they've lost their job. And we have some ownership on that. That's we have blame in that. So that's part of the survival part of the success and survival.
Yeah. And I've talked about another little piece of that. I think I've talked about two groups that we really need to focus on as leaders in fire service, and that's the people that are kind of uninspired. You know, they're perceived as being lazy. They don't really do much. They're not involved in much. And the people that are just overwhelming and just they're pushing the boundaries. They're questioning authority, things like that. And they aren't bad people. They are people that on one hand need some inspiration. They need some push. They need to be inspired and motivated. And on the other group, you just need to direct that passion and that aggression, you know. And I feel like there's so many people in those two categories in the fire service. And if we start tapping into those, the exponential growth and the good things that will come out of that are just, it's innumerable, I would say. And I think that kind of goes in the same area, that we just got to start reaching these people and helping these people.
And that goes back to the human nature part of thing. Everybody is the way they are for a reason. Now, I'll tell you, I got a couple people in my organization, I can't figure it out for the life of me. They do just enough to get by. They have all these opportunities. I've sat down and talked to them personally, and that's the way they're going to be. And though you want to be cautious before you give up on somebody. I don't know if we'll ever solve that problem, but we got to look at the environment that they're in. We got to look at what their personal values are, and if they conflict with the organization's values, we got to look at what their short and long-term goals are, and then find out what's going on a little bit, you know, if you want to take it to that level, or at least consider that there may be factors outside the firehouse that they're having to deal with. But not everybody's meant to do this job. We probably let go of an above average number of people during probationary periods. We're not afraid at the 10-month period in a year probation to say, hey, you're not going to cut this. And I think what a lot of people will do is say, we don't want to go through the process again. Let's make it work. And then their problems their whole career. Or we'll get somebody really passionate, the person that we want, and we'll put them in a toxic firehouse. And in 6 months, the passion will be beat at them. We don't do anything about it. We allow that. That's going on today in firehouses across the country. There is some crappy company officer who all he or she does is care about themselves. They're going to do the least amount of possible to keep them out of trouble, and they're not going to invest at all in anybody that they're responsible for. And the system is allowing that. You got to think there's a battalion chief, and there's an operation chief, and there's a fire chief that's allowing that to happen. So who are you going to blame? You know, that's a systemic problem. And that's something, you know, if you don't have standards, if you don't have expectations with accountability, I think mentoring is very important. I think if you have a formal mentoring process, you can take care of a lot of those problems. But for every problem that exists in a fire department organization, there's several layers that have allowed that to exist.
Kind of going off of that, something else I've heard you say is you kind of expressed your concern, I guess is a good way to put it, about a divide that you kind of see coming, and that divide is in between the people that are really not motivated. They're happy with not going out and learning and just kind of improving anything. They're just happy where they're at, and those people that are motivated to do more, to train more, to go outside and gain more knowledge and all that. And I don't think that's a future problem. I think that is already here. And I don't know if you
I'm being
agree with that
optimistic.
or not, but
I'm being a little optimistic. It is here. It is.
Yeah. Do you see any, not easy, but what do you see as some solutions to that? Is it just, if you're one of the fired up people, you do what you feel is right to do, and if sooner or later hope that some of those people kind of come over to the other side, or what can we do about that?
I don't have a good answer for that. I probably get a call a week, if not more, from some passionate kid who's stuck in a toxic firehouse, and they want to know what to do. And I don't have a good answer. I can only control the Colony Fire Department, but it is a real problem. Experience is only valuable if you share that experience. And
Yes.
if you put somebody in charge of folks, and I'm thinking of somebody with kids in the fire service. Everybody, you're a company officer, right? Everybody who's under your charge
Yes.
is somebody's kids. It's the most important thing in somebody's life. You better take that pretty serious. If my kids are victims of incompetent officers, the brotherhood goes out the window. They're not playing the game the way they should be. Then there's no. But that's going on all over the place. So I think what you have to do is you have to be very clear with those people that are in supervisory positions. Make sure that they understand the expectation, but you got to hold them. You got to hold them accountable to it. Standards or expectations without accountability produce nothing. It's just an interesting conversation, and I think that's where we got to start. Now, should there certainly be a respect for those people who have been there and done that? They put in the 20 years, 30 years on busy engine companies and busy truck companies. But there's still a way. Those people probably still have pretty good attitudes and they want to share their knowledge. We just got to help them make the connection with the people that they're leading. I'm talking about the ones who physically choose not to get any better. Who all the officer has to do is, if a young firefighter goes out and let's say they go to Wichita Hot, or they go to Mile High, or they go to Fireman PDX, or any of the other great conferences, the 350s going on, and they come back, all that officer has to do is say, hey, tell us what you learned. Okay. And the problem is already beginning to fix itself. But what happens too frequently, I don't want to hear about that. You're a dumbass for doing it on your time off, for paying your own money, for being away from your family. We don't do it like that. So we don't want to hear about it. Go take that somewhere else. That's what we got. And that's a conscious decision by somebody who doesn't need to be in that leadership role. And as a fire chief, as an ops chief or a battalion chief, if I know that person is doing that and we don't have a conversation, then I'm part of the problem. And that's the only way you fix it. All they got to do is say, hey, let's talk about it. Tell us what you learned. Let's see if the company can get a little bit better. No problem. But when you just shut it down, then the separation starts, then the resentment starts, and the other members in the crew are going to see this, and they're going to see this young firefighter does not have the experience, but they have the skills and knowledge, and they're going to be attracted to that, and then pretty soon the company officer's lost a firehouse. And then what do? Then you just got a toxic work environment, and that will negatively impact the culture.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably one of the biggest disappointments that I would say is going on in the fire service right now. Is you have those people that love the job, that are passionate about the job, wanting to do great things for the fire service and for their department and for their crew, and spending their own money, spending their own time to do things like that and try to bring it back, and it's just completely shot down or just not utilized, or like you said, that's not how we do it, blah, 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 whatever it is. And Matt, you are really wasting an opportunity to push your department farther and farther, and to grow and to really get to another level by tapping into those people and all that. And it's sad
It takes time. You got to implement it, and you got to be patient, because some people are just going to have to do their time and leave. But as you promote new officers, they need to understand that going forward, this is the standard, and that's the standard you uphold. There's no reason a 15 or a 20-year officer should in their head think that they're too salty, they're too experienced, or they're burnout where they shouldn't be developing their people. That's nonsense. So you got to start with the group of officers and say, this is what we want to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now. We'll let these people kind of exist, and we'll work with them, and we'll do the best we can and get them to the end of the career. But going forward, this is how we're going to be. And you got to start someplace, and you got to be patient. It's not going to happen overnight.
Oh yeah.
You know, I always say it takes 18 to 24 months. Whenever I've imposed a culture modification or a culture modification action step, it takes about 18 to 24 months before you see that embraced or valued by the culture.
Yeah. I agree with that. I haven't been an officer long enough to give it a timeline like that, because I'm still young enough to where almost every day I go, or not young in the position of that, pretty much every day I come on shift, I look back and think, gosh, I didn't know anything a year ago about being an officer. I didn't know anything 6 months ago. You know, last shift, I learned something that I didn't know that I wish I would have known. You know, it's always like, gosh, how did I survive 2 years ago as an officer? Because I feel like I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. So I love learning. I love tapping into those, like these, you know, these firefighters that we're talking about, because I just enjoy growing and learning and kind of branching out.
But not everybody
It's
shares
very
that.
important.
We know that. You know, we know that.
No, and yeah, absolutely. And that's something that you've been very very vocal about, that you do. You know, you send people to, like you said, these conferences, the Water on the Fire, the Wichita Hot, you know, all of these places that are awesome conferences. And I'm trying to think of the best way to word this, but do you think that a department can truly grow, can truly succeed, if they are completely against outside education, against sending people places, against, you know, bringing these ideas in? Do you think an organization can go anywhere if that's the mindset that they have?
I'm not going to, you know, nothing is impossible. I don't know how you do it. I'm sure some have been successful. Now, I can tell you from personal experiences, when I researched the book, I looked at about 400 suburban organizations, and I looked at their training, their commitment to training, their mentoring processes, kind of all those things. And I broke them down into categories. I mean, again, I'm going to go back to the success question. It depends what you and I define success as. You know, if the standard is when the tones go off, the trucks roll out the door under however many seconds, and they got on scene in however many minutes, and a citizen doesn't complain and nobody gets hurt, if everybody goes home and the fire went out as the only standard, sure, yeah, you can do that. But if you know, our budgets are going up every year, our citizens are demanding more. If you want to say you're competing at a professional level, absolutely not. You know, pros go to hitting coaches and, you know, batting coaches and quarterback coaches, and they, you know, Tiger Woods even goes to you know, somebody helps him with his swing. If we don't have that, there's three types of practice. There's naive practice, purposeful practice, and deliberate practice. And naive practice is doing the same thing over and over again, thinking you're going to get better. Science says that doesn't happen. Purposeful practice is where you're doing something, somebody's demonstrated, you're doing it, and you're getting immediate feedback. Yes, that's right. No, that's wrong. Let's do it again. So that's some level. So somebody's got to know what that looks like. Deliberate practice is when during your training, your drilling, you move outside your comfort zone. So if those things are happening, if when you go out to drill, there's somebody there who's pushing you to be better, then yeah, you probably can. But the science is probably going to say that there's not that person in the organization because you've been in a bubble. So, you know, again, it's where is that influence? It's all about the influence. You know, the organization, if you don't send anybody out, the organization's only going to be as smart as the smartest person in the organization.
Absolutely.
The Colony Fire
Yeah,
Department is much
that's
smarter.
exactly.
The Colony Fire Department is much smarter than me now, because they've gone out and done all these things and they've
Yep.
improved on it. They're much smarter than me on the job. They know more. They can do more. And if we didn't send people out, I'd hate to think
And
that
I
the
would think,
organization never could get any smarter than me.
yeah, I would think as a fire chief, or even just at my level, as a station officer, that's how I want it to be. I don't want to be the only person that knows how to do something. I don't want to be, the roof of knowledge and expertise. I want there to be people below me that excel in areas that I don't know about. I'm not good at, whatever. And I just feel like it just makes sense that would be the mindset, I guess. And but like we said, it's not always the case. I get another question in that arena, if you will. So you did all the research on all these different departments, tons and tons of departments. For those particular departments that are kind of closed off to that outside influence and outside knowledge, do you have any idea kind of what drives that? Why that's the case?
Well, I mean, and I'm not saying this, I don't know a positive way to say this. Most of the organizations I found that are like that, the chief has come from within. So you've promoted from within, and there's no motivation. They're saying, hey, why fix it if it ain't broken? We've always done it that way. So they're just going to continue doing the same thing again and again and again and again. If you're not bringing anybody in, so that's one reason, I think. Another reason, some will say it's money. We just don't have the money, but you can sit down at a computer and be exposed to a world, of technology. If you just look at the UL stuff, regardless if you agree with the science or not, if it causes you to form an opinion for or against, that's learning. So there's really not an excuse not to. I really don't know the reasons. I know there are departments that don't like to expose themselves because they know they lack in skills, and they don't want to put themselves out there because they don't, they got this great curb appeal. They got these beautiful firehouses and nice fire trucks, and they look like they got their act together. But once they roll out the door, it's a shit show. And they don't want to expose their weaknesses. I know there's a part of that. I don't know what percentage it is. So I'm only assuming those things. But there's certainly the majority of the organizations out there would fall under that. They don't have standards. They don't have accountability. And they just kind of survive instead of thrive. And I think that's the key word. A lot of organizations can survive. What we're talking about is creating an organization or a fire company that thrives, because it is a living thing. And we're creating an environment where it can grow and reach its full potential. And I think that's what our citizens want. They're going to invest if the citizens give us $1.2 million for a new tower ladder, they want to get $1.2 million worth of tower ladder firefighting capability out of that. What a lot of us do is we ask for that 1.2 million, and we only give $100,000 return on that truck because we don't know how to use it. And that's unsustainable.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point to make. The question I asked, thrive, maybe substituting the word succeed for thriving. I think that's a better way to look at it. What are you doing to really allow your department to thrive? That's a good question to spend some time thinking about for any level. What am I doing as a station officer to help my crew thrive? It's a lot to think about for sure. And again, that goes right back to your what the target is, what you're measuring that off of. And 10 different officers can go 10 different routes and have 10 different targets, but still what matters is how you perceive it and doing it in the right way. So that's some really good stuff for sure. Absolutely. Something else that
I'm
kind
telling
of,
you, a lot of it's controversial.
oh yeah.
A lot of it,
Oh, yeah.
people disagree with you and I as we're sitting here, because it happens to me all the time. I've got a a group of people out there who just about every time I open my mouth, they want to criticize it. So you got to take a position and believe it's the right thing, and not
Yeah.
let those things bother you.
Yeah. No, and I've brought it up over and over again, and I don't know if you've heard it or not, but one of my first guests, he had a saying, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing it in the right way? And are you doing it for the right reasons? And if you can answer those three questions, yes, then I don't know what to tell you. If you have a problem with anything that, I'm doing and I answer yes to those three questions, sorry, but I don't feel sorry, not sorry type answer. You know what I mean?
Yep. No,
And
I
so
agree.
you just got to go off of that. Yep,
Yep.
for sure. Uh, just a couple more questions. I want to respect your time. I know we've been on a little while, but
That's why I want
I've
to do it on
really enjoyed.
Friday. It's a good day. So Friday's a good day.
Perfect. Uh, Something else that I have kind of started really putting a priority on is, like I said, I'm a station officer. Just kind of historically, I feel like our station officers haven't really been involved in the task level stuff as far as training. We don't do it on scene, so we don't do it in training. We'll have hose deployment and hose advancement stuff, and we'll just kind of sit back and let the firefighters do it because that's who's doing it. But I've really adopted the mindset of putting a priority on involving myself in that, because I feel like it's so important for me to not only let my people see me mess up and be okay with it so that they know they can, but also I want to know that stuff so that I can teach my newer individuals that may be coming on. And so I know you've kind of spoken on the importance of officers being involved in training. Is that kind of your mindset too, or do you have some other thoughts as far as that?
I mean, it goes back to what we've been talking about kind of all along. We for years we've talked about strategy and tactics, but we only recently started talking about technique and task level stuff. So if you're the company officer, if you are responsible for producing a functional fire company, a group that goes out and does whatever the standard is in your organization. So you need to understand at the technique level. Maybe you're not the best at doing it, but you should certainly understand what the correct way and the incorrect way looks like. And you should be able to offer that feedback, that purposeful practice or deliberate practice feedback, to help correct deficiencies. And that doesn't mean you have to be the best at doing it, but you probably should understand it as well as anybody so that you can provide that feedback and say, yes, we're going in the right direction, or no, we need to fix something and go in this direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm blessed right now that I have my driver is very fired up about training, and he's awesome about technique, and just anytime we need instruction, he's there to do it, to give it. But also what is driving kind of this mindset is I know sooner or later he's going to be taking some promotional exams. He's not going to be around. I don't know who my new driver will be. So that very well may fall on my shoulders. And I want to be prepared for that. I want to be able to be that person, whether I'm a station officer or senior firefighter, whatever. I want to be able to pass. And it goes back to something you said earlier. And I thought it was an awesome quote, is experience is only valuable if you share that experience. And man, that speaks right to what I'm talking about, and just my whole message. If you are a senior firefighter that has so much knowledge and so much skill and so much good to pass on, you are doing yourself, your department, your crew, everybody a disservice if you don't share that. And that's kind of where I'm going with it. Is it doesn't matter what rank you are. It doesn't matter, what experience, whatever. You have something to give, and you have something that you can make somebody else better at, and you really got to dig into what that is and start doing something about it, because that's how we're going to make the fire service better right there, is for everybody to start stepping up and start sharing whatever it is you have.
You're exactly right, and there's a lot that are doing that. There are a lot that they perform at a professional level, at the technique level, and they're teaching us at the very basic level, and then we build upon that. But if we miss that, if we don't understand it at that level, then you can't guarantee the final product. And we've missed that for years. You know, I talked to a fire chief the other day, and he was criticizing me because we have a very choreographed fire response, and everybody has pre-arrival assignments. And his comment to me goes, "You mean I can't expect my people to pull hose and throw ladders?" And I said, "Well, if that's all you want them to do, yeah, but there's so much more to throwing ladders and pulling different size lines." And so that's how we get into those cultures that says, you know, that's not important. If I'm a fire chief who goes around and says we're an EMS department that occasionally goes to fires, I have just told the organizations that being prepared for firework is not that important. And sometimes it's those little things that just say, well, why bother if this isn't important? Why burn my energy and waste my time on it? And that's happening every day.
Yeah, that's it. It's funny you bring that up. That is probably, looking back, I think that's probably one of the biggest areas of growth personally for myself within the past year as an officer, is writing assignments. So I have never been on a crew that had writing assignments. I didn't even know what they were until 8 months ago, probably. It was always, if you're on the side of the fire, you pull the line. And now that I'm an officer, and now that I have been introduced to that idea of writing assignments, I don't want to have to go into every task that has to be done on scene. I want to be focusing on what I have to do. And I've got a group of firefighters behind me that I am totally confident they will get their jobs done, as long as we know, you know, okay, this person does this person does this, and whatever else. And yeah, every scene is different, every fire is different. I can quickly go off an audible out of that and do something else, but I don't have to sit there and lay out every single thing. And it's just interesting to think that before I knew about them, I didn't know that they were, I just didn't know. And now you look back and it's like, God, why would you ever want to operate like that? I don't get it. So it goes back into the reaching out and learning other people's ways, and gaining that knowledge.
I'm writing an article right now, and I'm calling it a case for writing assignments. And there's science to support that. There's something called mental imagery or mental representation. This is part of our learning. There's something that's called pre-arrival rehearsal, to where you can, when we talk about positioning a firefighter for success, that can start at the beginning of that shift by that firefighter knowing what they're going to do if there's a fire call that day. And I'm gonna just add this. We say, yeah, all fires are different, but they're a lot alike. And I compare it to the airline industry. Every flight is different. The age of the plane, the experience of the pilot, the weather. Yet they're the most checklist-driven industry that I know of. So we can say our fires are different, but we're going to do the same thing on every fire. We're going to address fire attack on every fire. It doesn't matter if it's in a high rise. It doesn't matter if it's in a strip. We've got to address fire attack. We've got to address search. We've got to address ventilation. We've got to address water supply. We've got to address exposure protection, on down the line. So it may be in a little different looking box, but the way we approach that, and then like you say, and if we got to deviate from that, we call an audible and we shift gears. But we are taking away a huge advantage from our firefighters by not giving them any idea what they're going to be doing until they set the parking brake in front of a building that's on fire. And like I say, there's science. It's a whole nother show, but there is a lot of science. This book, Peak, the Secrets from the New Science of Expertise, talks a lot about it. and all these things that people who perform, athletes, musicians, military, the things they can do to better prepare themselves to do that.
Yeah. I think it's the goal of those writing assignments is, unless something is seen during the walk around, during the 360, whatever happens, unless something is seen that makes me want to change our assignments or on paper, whatever, I don't have to say a word to any of my crew members until at least we're ready to go in the front door. I mean, that's literally the goal. And I think it takes so much off of my plate as an officer.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I think really kind of that mindset shift started changing, because you had a couple of different little lectures that you brought to Oklahoma, and there were a couple of people that went to those and shared some of that knowledge, and that's kind of where I started digging into it. But man, that if you had the two to choose from, either I pull up on scene and literally have to dish out every assignment, or I pull up on scene and don't say a word to my crew until I get to the front door, it's not hard to figure out what would be the better choice for sure.
Yet there'll be people who will argue that, they'll say it
Yeah.
takes away critical thinking on the fire ground, critical decision making, that I disagree with that. And like I say, I hope to someday be able to prove it with science, but no other activity with where people perform does it that way. Imagine if a pro football team every night had people in different positions. It'd be total, but the fire. Yeah. And the reason we do it, there's no justification for doing it other than it's easy for staffing. Nobody can tell you can prove that's the best way to do it. It's just easy at staffing, and it doesn't hurt anybody's feelings because everybody gets to ride the truck, everybody gets to ride the engine, everybody gets their chance on an ambulance. So we do it for emotional reasons, not because it improves our performance in any way.
Yeah. Yeah. But and you saying that right there, we had the topic earlier about how is the schedule going to help the citizens, or you brought up the point of how is it going to help the citizens for the firefighters to get raised. Well, it's the same thing right there, just opposite, so it's just funny, it's funny. But anyway, I look forward to that article. That'll be something.
I'm working on it.
Good. That'd be interesting. Well, Chief, I think that I've pretty much exhausted my notes, man. I had a great time. I learned a lot from you for sure, and can't wait to put it out and get some other people involved in some of this learning as well. Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on or talk about before we kind of wrap it up?
No, thank you for letting us get into the weeds. I think we got deep on some stuff, and that's usually missing in podcasts. We just kind of do a gloss over. So thanks for taking the time. But no, just keep doing what you're doing and getting the message out, and understand that, there's going to be people that disagree with a lot of what we say, and you're going to hear about that. But that's part of the process. I said in the beginning of the book, if somebody takes the contents of that book and improves on it, then I'll know the book was a success. And so, we just got to keep focusing on what we believe the right way is, what success looks like, and do what we can to get our people positioned for that. And that's really the best we can do, and never stop learning. To this day, I try to go to a couple firefighter conferences a year. I'm not pulling hose anymore. I'm not throwing ladders, but I want to understand who is influencing my people and the things that they're learning and what they're hearing, so that I know that I can talk to them about what we're trying to accomplish. But no, that's it. Thank you for your time. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. So the book is The Functional Fire Company. Tell us where we can find the book. Tell us where we can contact you if anybody has questions, or you got a website, anything like that.
My website is fireserviceleadership.com. You can email me at scott@fireserviceleadership.com. I also sell the book on my website. I can sell it for about $10 cheaper, but it's a Penwell Clarion book, so you can go to Fire Engineering Books and Videos and buy it there. It's on Amazon. Like I say, it's a little bit expensive, but if you contact me, let me know if you want it autographed, and I can get you a copy. But welcome any feedback that anybody has on it, good or bad, and that's pretty much it. Reach out to me if you got questions. I'll share what I can.
All right, good deal. Again, I appreciate we get in some more stuff, because there's so much that you can share, that it not only kind of gives us a direction and an idea of where we want to go as people that are trying to improve, but it also gives us hope that pushing through a career, you can do good things. You just got to keep pushing. So thank you again, Chief.
You bet. Thanks for having me on. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you once again for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate you tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed the show and gained a little knowledge, a little growth, grabbed a few takeaways, and hopefully it'll carry you into the rest of the week, and look forward to seeing you again. Wanted to take a short amount of time to thank my podcast sponsor, Woods Forcible Entry Door Kit. It's a great product. I love it. I own one myself. We use it all the time at the firehouse that I'm at, and just really love it. Great tool for training, great tool for exercise and working out. And I've said it before, this is a group of guys that are doing great things for the fire service, and just a good, solid group of guys. So I'm very appreciative for being a part of that team. So thank you to them. Please go check them out. And as always, if you don't mind, share, like, subscribe, download, whatever it is on whatever platform that you're listening to. If you enjoy what you're hearing and appreciate the content and the guests, I would really appreciate taking a little bit of time and doing that for me. Just to kind of helps the visibility of the show, and just helps me, to be honest, know that I'm doing the right thing and headed the right direction. So thank you very much for everything you do, and sharing the show and just helping me get my message out. So thank you. Hope you have a great week. Look forward to having you on back again. And until then, stay safe. Take care of each other.